Just going to take 1 minute, make sure this is playing where it should be. Okay, awesome. My name is Angela Levesque, and I am the owner of Hestia Health. My background is in exercise physiology, and I'm also trained in 3 different types of energy healing, hypnosis, and I do a lot of work with mind-body education. So today I wanted to talk to you about making meaningful change. When I first started in exercise physiology and I started working with clients, I would, create these very elaborate exercise programs, and we talk about meal planning and all of that. And what I realized is lots of people know what they should do, and we give a lot of whats, do this, do that. What we don't realize is that we really need to understand the whys. We need to get down deep and appreciate why we make the choices we make. What are some of the motivating factors that either prevent us or get us really excited about things? What is our relationship to the things we want to change, whether it's diet or exercise? There's all these things under the umbrella that unless we really go deep and do what I call the soul level work, people can tell you all the what's and the how-tos and all of that, but unless you really understand what's going on in here, it makes things so much more difficult. And you might find that you can make a change for 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, maybe even 6 weeks. But after that, you fall down into your own patterns, your old habits, and fall into the ruts. And so what I want to talk about today is not about the hows or the whats, but the whys, and really help you look at things from a different way to make the changes you make much more meaningful. Because that's what you need to do, is you need to create context and you need to create meaning around your choices so that they become enduring. Because we spend our days doing a lot of different things, and I often will work with people and they'll say, oh, I don't have time to do this or to that, but you realize that you do find the time to do some things. For example, TV. I think the average American watches about 35 hours of TV a week. So that's a whole other full-time job almost. And so if we can find enough time to do that, can we find time to do some of the things that are much more aligned with our purpose, that creates more balance and joy in our life? And I think that that's where, when you create that meaning behind it, that's where things are important enough that they endure. So I am going to try and share my screen with you here. And hopefully you'll be able to see I've put together a little bit of a PowerPoint. And this is the stuff I want to talk about today. First of all, we're going to address, are you ready for change? And this is really, really important. I want to talk about some of the neuroscience and the science behind how we create habits in the first place. And then we'll talk about how to make things meaningful. And finally, we'll end this webinar today with how to shift your behaviors. And I'll give you some real tools and tips to do that. So I hope that you do find a lot of meaning out of this, and hopefully I won't make it too long. I'm trying for about 30 minutes or so. So the first thing I really want to touch on is that you are a dynamic being. In fact, so dynamic that at the beginning of this webinar, you will be a different person at the end. So, and I don't mean that just from sitting here and absorbing information. Physically, mentally, emotionally, you are that dynamic. Your cells are constantly dying off and replicating, and you are every part about you. You're breathing in different things, you're breathing out, your digestion is working. All of these different processes in the body are actually shifting, and you are incredibly dynamic. So you might wonder, well, if I'm such a dynamic being, then why am I always stuck? And that is a really important question. And that is why I find it really important, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes, how habits are formed and some of the neuroscience behind that. Because as we keep our thoughts in the same place, we keep our bodies, we keep our actions, our behaviors, all of that static as well. So I just want you to realize just how important it is to really take conscious, deliberate action. And what I mean by that is so often so many things that we carry on through our lives were maybe put in or implanted sort of in us as children, and then we continue to move out through our lives and we continue to do the same things. And lots of times those thoughts and behaviors remain unchallenged. And so why I want to say that's so important is when we take deliberate action, we are setting an intention. We are putting our attention and awareness into the present moment, and that gives us the opportunity to really shift things. So when we continue to move off of autopilot and we just do what we do because we've always done it, then that's where we get the habitual habits, and that's where it becomes really difficult to shift those things. So the very first thing that I would like to address with you is, are you ready for change? And and I think people get very overzealous, and that's why we get a lot of the what's and the how-tos to do things, that if it was just a matter of information, if people just had a little bit more information, then people would make those changes. And clearly we know that's not the case. If we look at for something, my background's in lifestyle and diet and exercise change, those are billion-dollar industries. So clearly it's not that simple. And part of the reason is that people attempt to do things when they're not ready for it. And so I want you to ask yourself the why question. Why do you want to make the particular change you want to make? And maybe that's, getting more exercise. Maybe that's eating healthier, starting some sort of stress reduction practice in your life. Whatever it is, even if it's other things like you want to be more spiritual, whatever it is, you need to ask yourself why. And then I want you to pay really careful attention to the language you use. Because very often you'll ask something like, why do you want to lose weight? And people will say, well, my doctor says I should, or my husband says I should. And as soon as you hear that word should, I call that moving from the land of should. And so when you're moving from that space, what you need to focus on is different from somebody who really owns that behavior. And so their language might be like, oh, I've been thinking about this for a while. I really feel that I want to make this change, and they ache for it in every cell of their body. And that's a completely different place than, oh yeah, my husband thinks I should do this, or my doctor wants me to do this. And you can see the language, the responsibility of it is still, the accountability of it is still outside of you. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just a really important thing to become aware about, because as soon as we start to move from this place of should, and then we fail because we really don't have that really intrinsic motivation, or that motivation that comes inside of you that's attached to your beliefs and your values, then all of a sudden you make these changes really half-heartedly, and then they're not enduring and they don't last. And then the next time it kind of comes up and rises in your consciousness that you want to make change, your mind will say, oh, you can't do that. You've already tried. You'll just fail again. And again, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So if you wait until you're really ready to own it, until there's just such an incongruence between, how you feel and what's in your heart and your actions, and, you've done your research and you've read about things and you've talked to people and you've done all that wonderful stuff, that's when you're ready to make change. So I kind of think that there's sort of three places. So the land of should, you're kind of at the tipping point, and then when you're really, really ready to do it. So as I sort of alluded to, when you're moving from this land of should, your stage calls out for a different action. And so I want you to start, reading a few articles, going online, and maybe, for example, I'm going to use diet, reading some articles on nutrition, and really just kind of learning and playing with the idea and letting it sit with you, and maybe just trying a salad here and there, and just really kind of playing with the idea. And I want you to pay attention to the people in your life who really exhibit that behavior, that maybe Sam, and he's really interested in nutrition, and he's always eating really well, and think about him and the choices he makes, and how how they play out in his life and how they serve him as well. So that's a really important thing. And start to pay attention to your feelings about it. When you start reading those articles and paying attention to some of the people in your life that are exhibiting this behavior that you would like to replicate, do you feel a sense of expansion, or do you kind of feel contracted? And this is really important. Just think about your reaction to it. Does this shift, thinking about the shift, kind of scare you, or are you kind of like, this is kind of interesting? Are you kind of teeming with anticipation? So this is another thing that I want you to think about. Assess your reaction, and then start thinking about some of the kind of global impacts of you making a different decision, and their personal decisions. Is a shift in your diet, for example, is it also going to have an impact on your children and on your husband? And if you're kind of thinking you have kind of a more environmental mindset, does shifting your food, does that start to affect things globally as well? So you're just trying to broaden and expand your ideas around things. So that's if you're coming from the land of should. So you still have work to do, and I'm not saying don't ever make those changes, but you got to prepare yourself. You prepare yourself for so many other things in your life. It's important when you're thinking about making these big ticket lifestyle changes that you do that work as well. So now if you're kind of at the tipping point, I suggest you do all of the things I just mentioned and start to really develop your awareness even deeper. When you start to, I'm assuming if you're at the tipping point, you've already kind of put in some of these habits. Maybe you have a salad a few times a week. Maybe you started eating vegetarian, and you start to be really mindful, looking at the quality of the food, maybe looking at the calories, hopefully the quality first. But anyway, and just starting to notice, how does this food make me feel? Again, looking at the personal and global impact, and just kind of, again, expanding and trying things here and there, and seeing, that makes me feel good. This, for some reason, doesn't make me feel as satisfied. I feel very gassy and bloated after this, whatever it is. Or going for a walk. Maybe you started jogging, but you notice your knees hurt or your ankles hurt. And so then maybe you try walking, and maybe you try hiking, and maybe you go to a yoga class, and you just kind of check in, feeling it out, and seeing what really resonates with you. There's no point in doing things that you don't like, because that will not be enduring. So this is the opportunity to go out and explore and kind of expand your horizons and see where you can really go. And then finally, if, say, you're like, all systems go, you are ready, you've been thinking about this, you've done your research, you've been paying attention, you are ready for this, and you know it, you can feel it with like every cell of your body. And any time that you kind of trip up, or say you take a week or two off and you haven't moved your body, and you can feel it, you can tell that that's just not congruent with who you are anymore. This is when you start to learn how to substitute healthier behaviors for other things. It's a time to develop your sense of personal power, so following through when you say things, building self-trust. A lot of the times with lifestyle changes, people say they want to eat healthy, and then they have a couple of days where they just totally just eat like crap, and then they think, oh, I've lost everything. And the thing is you just need to build up trust. Once you start to get to this point, say you go on vacation and you get out of your normal pattern of things, you trust yourself enough that you know you're going to go back to it. And this is also the phase that I really always suggest finding help. So maybe it's a holistic nutritionist, or a personal trainer, or talking to your doctor, or whatever it is. But this is a great part, after you've done all that legwork, that they can really connect with you at this part and have the most good. Because if you try and do it while you're still in the land of should, like I said, it's going to work for a week or 2, 3, maybe 6 if you're lucky, and then you're just going to use it as an excuse about why you can't make the change when you're contemplating it at another time. So that's the very first thing. Are you ready for change? So the next thing I want to talk about is the science kind of behind how habits are formed. And this is really fascinating, and now, with our increase in technology and being able to really kind of brain map, and it's a fascinating thing to see how habits are formed, and it's kind of, we're seeing more of a transdisciplinary approach with psychology and neuroscience, and and I like to bring in a little bit of mystical, being my background. But so what really happens, and what they realize, that you have a thought and almost instantaneously another cascade of events happens. So you have this thought and there's this emotional component to it, and that leads to a biochemical component. So you have these, hormones and this biochemistry that has a response to both that thought and that emotion. And then as we do this, it leads to the same behaviors, and then ultimately the same behaviors lead to the same outcome. And of course, then it doesn't just happen once, doesn't happen twice, but we repeat this behavior over and over and again. And then this response becomes strengthened at every level, to the point that your neural networks become strengthened. And so those pathways in your brain actually kind of get preferential treatment. And then of course you actually even reproduce cells with the same receptor sites for the biochemical component. So they'll keep reproducing with more receptor sites because it just continually reinforces that in the body. And then of course, it's not a surprise, the same behaviors, and you're getting the same outcomes. So what happens when, and this is why at the very beginning I was talking about being very deliberate and intentional, is that this is how habits are formed, and then it becomes this unconscious kind of patterned, conditioned response that we just carry out through our lives. And we don't really think about it. And like I said, a lot of these things have been programmed early within us, and they just kind of carry through into adulthood, and then we continue to strengthen them, and then they just become so automatic that it becomes much more difficult. And that's why when we talk about things like food and exercise, and these are really fundamental to our existence. I mean, from day one, we were eating and moving our bodies, and then it just gets reinforced over and over and over again. So that's why it becomes so difficult. So being very mindful of your thoughts and being able to challenge that thought is so important. And I want to give you an example, and it's kind of an easy way to sort of understand this. So I want you to imagine that one time when you were 6 years old, you ate some broccoli, and you didn't realize it at the time, but you had stomach flu. So you ate this broccoli and you threw it up. And that was a pretty traumatic experience. You're kind of sick, and you're 6, and it's being sick and having the stomach flu, and you kept throwing up, and in your little 6-year-old brain you made this connection between broccoli and getting sick. And then as you get older, people ask you, hey, do you want broccoli? And you say, no, I don't like broccoli, it makes me sick. And then you continue and you get older, and you still have this kind of hate for broccoli. And even as you get older, you might not even specifically recall that instance when you were 6 years old, but your unconscious mind does. And so now you're 35 and you're presented with broccoli, and your brain will flip through this file folder of all the instances it can connect to broccoli, and it kind of says, no, you don't like broccoli. But then one day this guy you really like comes along and says, oh, come on, broccoli's so good for you, I love broccoli, give it a try. And the next thing you know, you're trying broccoli, and all of a sudden you're like, this is actually pretty good. And then maybe you try it again, cooked in a different way, and you realize, then maybe you do some research on the internet and you realize broccoli is kind of a superfood and it's full of all these great things. And then all of a sudden, you've challenged that thought, and now you're starting to create this new kind of program in there, this broccoli-loving program. And this is a really simplistic view that I've kind of laid out for you, but it's really important to understand that when we take deliberate action, when we challenge those thoughts, when we think about, hey, is that true? Is it really true that I'm not good enough? Is it really true that I can't change this, or that I'm a failure? And kind of think, where did that come from? And can I move forward with the present moment awareness that isn't true? And then as you start to do that, you create new neural networks, and you create new emotional responses and new biochemistry, and the next thing you know, you start to create new habits. And I don't even really like to use the word habits, because habits kind of connotes kind of this really unconscious, automatic process. But you understand what I'm saying. So challenge those thoughts, create new thoughts. Pay attention to the inner monologue that's going on in your mind. What are you telling yourself all day? Are you telling yourself, I'm fat, I'm lazy, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm lazy, I'm ugly? And when you think about the mind, and you think about it more as a tool, or kind of as a director of your body rather than kind of the entirety of who you are, and you spend time looking in the mirror saying, I'm so ugly, I'm so ugly, I'm so worthless, in what way is that directing your body? How is that creating that cascade of events through your body that's keeping you stuck? remember back to the beginning, I said you're a dynamic being, and so you start to change that, you change the entire cascade of events. So the next thing I want to talk about is how to make things meaningful. And I love this because again, it's the how-tos and the whats and do this, don't do that. And we need to make things meaningful for us if we're going to have enduring change. So really look and write down specifically, it's so important, what do you value? What's important to you? And this is how we start to bring that meaning and that context behind our choices. And what I always say, as soon as you start to align your heart, your values, and your actions, that's where meaningful change happens and enduring change happens. So, lots of times it's kind of this vague idea, oh, what do you value? Oh, I value my family, I value the environment. And I'm going to give you an example of how this works. Well, when I was younger, I was a pack-a-day smoker, I ate McDonald's 2-3 times a week. I had a lot of, I was kind of in college drinking mode. I had a lot of things that I didn't, that weren't so great for my body. And as I kind of, matured in adulthood, environmentalism became really important to me in this idea of sustainability. And it went beyond just, recycling my plastic bottles. It's something that was really, really important to me. So as I started to educate myself and do research, I realized that nothing changed our food system more than fast food. It fundamentally shifted our environment, changes the way that we produce and deliver food. And I thought, well, for somebody who's such an environmentalist, it doesn't really make sense for me to eat fast food. And there's lots of other reasons not to eat it. It tastes horrible. And it obviously is unhealthy. But one of the biggest things, and once I made that connection between the environment and eating fast food, I thought I no longer want to support that. And all of a sudden what happened is I took something that I liked and I was able to give it up, but in a way that it wasn't a sacrifice. It became a preference, because as soon as I really connected with my values and found that that was in alignment, it was really easy for me to give it up. And now it's been a decade plus since I've had a cheeseburger from a fast food place. But you understand what I'm saying? So you got to find it. And maybe you're not the tree hugger that I am, and that's totally fine. This isn't about perfection. This is about creating meaning. This is about creating purpose. And when you start to create purpose, that's where you live a more joyful life. It's not about perfection. That isn't to say that when I went to Mexico, I didn't have margaritas at noon at the swim up bar. And that's okay, because it's not about that. It's about really, really connecting with your life in a meaningful way. So I ask you to write down your values, and maybe it's not environmentalism, maybe it's not sustainability, but maybe it's being able to be there for your family. Maybe it's be able to walk up the stairs to your 3-4 walk up and not feel like it's taking every last bit of strength to do that. Figure out what it is that's important to you, and then find a way to have that reflected in your decisions. And sometimes you think, oh, what does one have to do with the other? But everything is so interrelated in our world that it's really not that hard when you think about it. And that famous quote, as trite as it might be the change you wish to see in the world. That's what you're starting to do. So my decision not to eat my double cheeseburger meal was not just about my health, but it was about me, making me feel like I have a say in this world, a say that moves us in this world and everybody towards the world that I would like to see. It's about me being the change. So I really ask you to, look at your values, write them down, and then figure out how it is that those are connected to the choices you make, because they absolutely are, whether it's where you spend your money, your family. There's just so many ways that those things are interrelated. So I really, really urge you to do that. And the last thing I want to talk to you about today before we end here is talking about shifting your behaviors. And so I want to leave you with some real tools and tips to make this happen. And the first thing I want you to ask yourself is, what are you really feeding? And whether that is smoking or, eating a tub of ice cream or the high fat sugar, whatever it is, not getting exercise, there's some payoff that you're getting. Now, maybe it's you're trying to deal with stress. Maybe you're trying to deal with a toxic relationship. There's so many different ways. You know, when I first started as an exercise physiologist and I was working with people, and of course I had been a smoker, and I could hear we would do these little 10 to 15 minute lifestyle counseling sessions with people, and other fellow exercise physiologists who had not had the party life that I had would say, you know, smoking's bad for you, you should quit smoking. I don't personally know any smoker who doesn't think that it's bad for them. But I would talk to them, what are you really feeding? Tell me about your day. When are the times that you most smoke? And, you know, maybe it was getting in the car. Maybe it was, you know, when they're really stressed out. Maybe it's when they're bored. So then you start to find a way to give them coping skills for those actions so that they're not just quitting smoking and all of a sudden they have no way to deal with their stress, or they have no way to deal with the boredom, or haven't figured out a substitute behavior for when they get in the car and the first thing they do is light up that cigarette. So whether it's food or lack of exercise or, you know, smoking or whatever it is that you want to shift, find out what's the payoff for you. What are you really feeding? And then you need to develop coping skills around that before you try to take that behavior out of your life. And I know that sounds weird. Everybody kind of has this now, let's do it now. But if you know, eat for your stress and then you stop eating, you stop overeating and you're not dealing with your stress, you're going to find another way. They've seen that with when they've done gastric bypass, is that when they were people were feeding their emotions with food or whatever it was, and all of a sudden now they physically can't eat. We've seen increases in alcoholism and drugs and gambling addictions and all of that, because what they were really feeding wasn't really addressed. So ask yourself that, and then develop those coping skills before you make changes. And then I also really want you to, again, develop that awareness. Pay attention to your relationship to whatever it is you're trying to change, whether it's food, for example, and this is a good one. How do you feel when, say, you eat that big double cheeseburger? How do you feel right before you want to eat it? What's going on in your body? How are you feeling during? Is it very satiating? Are you feeling guilt or shame or whatever it is? How are you feeling right after? How do you feel an hour after, 2 hours after? And by paying attention to those subtle shifts in the body, you start to hone in on those messages that your body's giving you. And you'll start to realize that when you eat certain foods, maybe you feel really bloated or you start to feel nauseous. Or you'll feel, if you pay attention right before you're about to do that, what is going on that's making you want to move into that place? Because I don't believe that anyone's natural state in their body is disharmony. I really believe, and from a very physiological level, we have all these homeostatic mechanisms that want to bring us back to balance. And I think from a spiritual, energetic level, we have all these things that really do want to bring us back to balance. So what is your body telling you? And then you have to be kind of pragmatic too. Make a list of barriers. Think about the times that become very difficult, whether it's office parties or you know, Friday's happy hour that all your friends want you to go out at, and you know that when you drink more, you always smoke more. So thinking about really being pragmatic and how do you make a list of your barriers and then develop action plans so you're not stuck in the moment, kind of, oh my gosh, what do I have to do here? What do I have to do? So I urge you to do that. And then think about ways that you can substitute behaviors. For example, if the first thing you do is you get in the car and you want to light up a cigarette. And this might sound silly, but using a carrot stick. And you can hold the carrot stick between your hands and you can chomp on it and it gives you some hand-to-mouth thing and all of it. There's lots of different things that you can do. Maybe it's exercise and having social support. And that's another important thing that I want to say is surround yourself by people who support the lifestyle you're trying to shift towards. If you're trying to quit smoking and every single person you know smokes a pack a day, then I'm not saying dump them as friends, but I'm saying until you can find a place where you can be comfortable with that, you need to surround yourself by people who are supportive of that and are modeling the behaviors that you're trying to change. So pay attention to your cues, if you're hungry, if you're stressed, and then have backup plans on how to deal with that before you get yourself stuck in that situation. And as you do this, every little time you get in that car and you don't have a cigarette, or every little time you say, I'm going to go for a walk after work, and you do, you start to build personal power. And another way to say that is you start to build self-trust. And as you build this up and you build this up and you build this up, then you know you can go to Mexico and have a drink, a margarita at noon on the beach, and when you get home, you're not worried that you're going to fall back into these old patterns, or that everything has totally fallen apart because you went on a vacation. And as you do that, you start to trust yourself more, and that's a really important part of this. And I want to leave you with one really important piece of information from that, is you can't cheat on a lifestyle change. There is no cheating on a lifestyle change. There's maybe choices that are incongruent with where you want to go, but there's no cheating. So getting out of this all or none mentality that, okay, I had that one cigarette, or I broke down and I ate an entire pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. It's okay. It's okay. Life isn't about perfection. And it's about living in alignment with your heart, your values, and your actions. And that's where purpose comes. That's where joy comes. And that's how you make meaning around your decisions. So educate yourself, become aware, and pay attention. Pay attention to your body. Pay attention to the cues. And be pragmatic, too. Come up with action plans and ways to deal with some of those situations that you know are difficult for you. So I want you to notice that I did not make you sign up for to watch this. I honestly believe in having real connections, and I only want you to join my newsletter if you think I'm interesting. I only want you to work with me if you connect with me. And so I just want to give you a few ways to connect if you've enjoyed what I've said, if it has resonated with you. My website is hestiahealth.com. My name again is Angela Levesque. And ways you connect, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. You can join my newsletter. And if you want to work one-on-one with me, I have a new client special. The first session is $35, and that is a huge, huge, huge discount. But I love the work that I do, and I'd really like to share it. And I offer classes both on and offline. If you're in Boise, I have classes all over Boise. And if you want to email me about any of these things and find a way to connect, I'd love to hear from you, and I really do mean that from the bottom of my heart. You can talk to anyone. I'm really good at just even communicating on email if people have a question or just want to reach out. So my email is angela@hestiahealth.com, and I want to thank you so much for being here with me today, and I hope you took away some things from it, and have a great night. Thank you so much for coming.